constructs of actually what life is. Today, we were going to start with what is referred to as Tier 1. Now, Tier 1 is our fundamental life. It is basically, it's not so much mannerisms, it's our automatic nervous system, for example. If we go to sleep, we keep on breathing. If the insect sees something, it keeps going to it. It can't escape the light. It flies into the light every time because it's driven by the pattern. It cannot make a decisionary process at this point. It responds and reacts to the environment stimulus. And that's basically all it can do. It will continue to do it as soon as it goes back to its programming of its desire and how it keeps its life existence. As you can see up here, I'm using the ant. Fundamentally, even the most advanced is, you almost get a response, a stimulus, is a fight or flight is about the best you can get out of a Tier 1. Now, we represent Tier 1 in our own bodies every day. We call this the medulla oblongata, the brain stem. It operates our automatic functions. It lets us breathe. It lets our heart rate. It lets us do all these things so we can go on our life and our other parts of our brain can do other things, which that poor critter doesn't have. He just has the first one, Tier 1. At this point, we want to go in and start addressing the more complexities of life. We want to go into what is referred to as Tier 2. Now, Tier 2 is the first development and creation, and this is where you get emotional response. This is the beginning of the voice, I want. Not I need, which is the primary field of the first layer of I need. Everything is I need. It cannot differentiate. At Tier 2, the level of advancement, it is now driven by emotion. It is driven by desire. And as you can say, it also is guided by preference. Every one of us has at some point have animals and pets. I will use the example of my house dog. Chihuahua sits there and receives its food. It likes that food. It'll eat it. But it looks at that food and it looks at you and sees what you're eating and goes, actually, I want with you. Either that or it'll do something more and says, I don't like what you're eating, or that. I want you to go up and get what's in the cabinet and look at you and bark and tell you its preference, literally its preference over it was its need. We see, and if you say no, frequently it will go and pout, or it will bark and go, ah, and get upset and get frustrated and do things, much like our 1.5-year-old, when you say no and it has a want, it expressed when you're trying to have it comply with a need. That is the child not getting its desired want. Desire is frequently known with the terrible twos and tantrums at this point. This is because even though the child is developing a preference in his brain stage, he cannot differentiate the difference between that, and in many cases, the people and many domesticate any animals that are what we call predatory prey. They have to be able to shift their viewpoint to know when I'm being chased or when I'm the one that's doing the chasing. So you have these different perspectives that's required, and it's upper thinking that you get. So as with the child, it is not able to differentiate its I wants and I needs and prioritization. They're all the same thing. Now, what controls this behavior at Tier 2 is something that I make reference up to here. It's fear of retribution. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to receive punishment. We see this in even most of our religions is based upon a Tier 2 construct. Is I don't want to go to hell and burn in the lake of fire. I don't want to receive that punishment. I want to make sure I do these things to achieve non-punishment. Some religions will focus on to avoid punishment. Other religions may focus on don't worry about the punishment if you live these code and ethics, etc. But there's still this fear of what we refer to as damnation, and up and down through our historical society, and many times in our history through multiple religions, we have seen this propagate and become very powerful into the destruction of many people at many times throughout our history. On this one. Another point is the fear of retribution. You see, is law enforcement. I don't want to get in trouble, go to jail. I can use an example You see people that will have on the different mentality that I will go through later on, but I can use the example now of those that are driven by something we call conviction that I will discuss shortly, and the power of and fear of retribution. Two individuals about 9:30, almost 10 o'clock at night, are going down the streets together. They come across the light that in 10 minutes it's going to become a flashing light. What will happen is, more often than not, the rural person, the person that has the function of, I have to be more individual, I have to take care of my own personal responsibilities and things like that, will sit there and see the flash, will sit there at that light, and he will sit there and look back and forth, and there is no vehicles anywhere in sight. He will treat it like it's already a flashing light, and in 6 seconds he will drive through. But the city person who is raised through fear of retribution will sit there and wait through the entire cycle of that light until that light changes. And the reason being is, if you look at the cultural derivatives that come forth in the tier 2 level of your level of independence of the collective thought, is how I would say it is. Collective thought is predominant in tier 2 culture. The definition of collective thought is you, entity. You are in charge of meeting my needs, so I may go do my wants, thus freeing me of that personal responsibility. And if you can't do it, we'll find somebody that can. And you will live like that, and you have an expectations of this safety net, this guardianship that we do. You have an opinion that the collective has the right. Now, how does that collective operate? Since we're going to talk about numbers right now, the way it is in today's world is 7 out of every 10 people is tier 2. They operate their life at tier 2. Their life management is at tier 2. Everything operates at basic tier 2. There are places of business where they may want to have is my 1 and 9, that third rule there. You see, my I want and I need is more important than yours. In other words, if I'm going to make a deal with you, I'm going to make sure I have the clean end of the stick, not the dirty end of the stick. I may try to make sure there's no stick with any dirt on it at all, but if there is, I'm going to make sure I have the clean end, period. Because you judge your I wants and I needs based upon that structure and necessity of how you live your life. And you'll live that life going through that thing. Now, you may alter your behavioral patterns because of possessionary processes like family, friends. You may give and do things for those people, but for your general public, that outer sheen of your interactions, it's definitely going to be on this layer. Now, you go down into other layers where you have other contacts and other derivatives coming in to influence your opinion of what you're going to sacrifice. So that's a whole different story. We are staying at the very foundation. All those other things are built upon these base layers. So the points that you want is, they are unable to basically prioritize their wants and needs. They are the desire. They cannot differentiate. If you have a conflict of an I want and an I need, you have a hard time. That's the whole point that goes into the development of stage 3, and this is the development we go into children. Now, this is the aspect I wish to talk about, is how this guides into our life as children. 1 through 6, our life is I want. And I want to learn to walk. I learn to want to talk. I learn to want everything. And you'll start learning things. And you learn all these things. And the point of graduation is somewhere around 6 years old. It says, Mommy, look at me. I can do a cartwheel. I have mastered the skills of physicalness. I can put my own clothes on. I can go to the bathroom. And I sure know how to ask for something. And I hope I get it. And I can play upon your emotions of guilt and desire to achieve those things that I have learned in the short period of life that I had with my cooperative codependency interacting with you. And I will address it at a subconscious level just by pushing your emotional buttons, because they have an access to that button panel, because that's another aspect, as I want to point out in tier 2. Feel first, think second. Throughout life, more problems is, I got upset, I didn't mean it, you have to apologize. The emotional complication that appears before thinking, frequently when you receive a stimulus, either you will process it through a thinking process, and then maybe later on get mad, or your initial response is to get mad. And the honest to truth of humanity 6 to 7 out of 10 people will have the emotional response first. Then they may apologize, they may regret, they may think back, they may reevaluate, but it is an emotional response first. They do not really it's hard for a tier 2 to negotiate in a conversation to say the difference between I think and I feel. They're interchangeable in that construct because I want and I need is interchangeable for the same process. And it's because of this that you have these problems that can develop, because you cannot differentiate your desire and want. This is where you have problems with addiction, and you cannot say tier. This is where you have peer pressures that are coming into adolescence and all of these things. So what is the remedy? What happens in tier 2 that even opens up a window of tier 3? That's the process. The 7 through 14 is the development. This is where the child learns to prioritize I want and I need, and to learn that I need comes first. And I will operate on that. In ancient religion, the actual facility and use of fasting was not for purification. That was for smoking incense. But when you go for dietary restrictions, was based to teach you how to say no to a desire that you want. The definition of free will fundamentally at this level, and will always be at this level, is singular this sentence: the ability to say no to one's own desires and wants. Nothing more. Not self-determination, not freedom, only the ability to say no to my own wants and desires. At this point, now, if you have that and develop that through maturity, the child will go through 14 to 21. This is the period of barter. This is where we are getting ready to go in to tier 3. The function of barter. If I stay at tier 2 and barter with you, I'm always going to make sure that I have the better end of the deal. A tier 3's philosophy is my I want and I need has just as much value as your I want or I need or yours. And I am here to give fair barter to your I want and I need so I can meet yours and you can meet mine. And I will always have respect for your I want and I need. Because if I do not carry that respect of equality of I want and I need, if I stay at tier 2, now I can justify enslavement. I can justify and say, my I want and I need is more important than you. You will submit. I will take your money. I can take your life. I can take your supplies. I can enslave you. I can do whatever I want. Because the necessity of the group says, I need this. And you will sacrifice what you need or what you want. There is no consideration whatsoever in collective thought of the individual want and desire. It is very one-sided in that regards, that you will always see in collective behaviors at a tier 2 behavior. Tier 3 behavior, you'll see more happens frequently in areas of what we call rural areas. Now, there's a reason for this. Because in rural areas, you are forced to face the reality of the daily consequences of everyday action. If I have a water leak, I got to go turn my water off. I got to dig up a hole. I've got to call this person. I got to make this reference. I've got to do this. I have a patch. I got to patch my roof. You have a tendency, my fence has got to, I fix it. I fix it. In urban life, you fix things. You have that. In city life, you don't own anything. If I got a leak, I got to call the apartment manager. I got to make sure the housing zone says I'm allowed to paint my house this color. I can't have a carport here. I can have this there. I cannot do anything without permission. You do not own truly anything. You must ask permission. Therefore, there's no level of independence to meet your own I wants and I needs. The entity is making it for you. Therefore, you grow up, and that's why this is why the United States is very unique. Because of the revolution it had in all that time period, you had a large quantity of people that were seeking individualism and did not want a collective thought to take care of them at all. Whereas the European construct is, you find it a much greater thing, and collective thought is tier 2 is much more common in that, because they accept it's socialism, and in the constructs, if you want to have a government that has an entity that's regulating and controlling the daily affairs of your life, versus you having the own control of your own life to some degree. This is where you find the conflicts between tier 2 and tier 3. The only way to achieve free will is if that is the ability to say no to your own want and desire. That's with a normal mind. Now, if you have, let's just say, you suddenly have manic depression. Now that's a chemical disorder. So that you have an interference that's allowing you, our alcohol intoxication will alpha and interferes with the processing and the ability and the willpower of somebody to do something. Must understand, willpower is not a state of being. Willpower is a process of saying no to oneself and to regulate that lifestyle by saying no and prioritizing and say, this is more important than that. I will not do that, even though my desires and wants to, my friends want me to. I will not get in that car. I will not do that thing. We see it in driver's ed. You will sit there, will not sit there and get into the conversation singing if I'm the driver. I will not be speedy when I'm trying to race around the corner going home. These are these independent wills of desire and wants and I needs. The ability to say, no, I know I really want to do it, but I'm not going to do that. That's conviction. That's not fear of retribution. Fear of retribution is that what I taught, fear of punishment. And the beauty of it is in tier 2, they can either address you punishment, that the primary mechanism for tier 2s is the function and use of guilt. The religions and every construct will apply guilt to the mannerism, so you will punish yourself till they get there to punish you. They will rely upon guilt as the mechanism to drive and to control tier 2 behavior because it's treated as a collective group. This is why you have the common references, the terminology, and you see in politics of sheeple and all these other variations that you go in that goes into political constructs. No matter what it is, you're still going into the collective thought of, is the person operating at a level of tier 2, or can they achieve a level of tier 3? But it's a great success. You look at it 2,000 years ago and you can look at the construct. Now, this is anecdotal, of course, because there was no statistics done. But you look at the points of what the common laws of 2,000 years ago, less than 1 in 10 people had the expression of free will. They all gave in to their desires and their wants and everything. We've gone almost 3,000, trying to struggle through almost 3,000 years to 4,000 years of struggle. And we finally, as an overall worldly population, got up to a whole 15%. And maybe in the United States, because of the deviational curve, because of individuality in large rural areas and the construct of how, representative republic versus a democracy, how those constructs came about to reinforce and give a secure a point over here that you don't see in the other cultural societies. That's where you see that difference in this political and social construct, because it was trying to be evaded even 200 years ago to avoid this basic construct of collective thought and being in tier 2. Because you find even in religion, they will find their religion is, even in the early passages in Christianity and Judaism, they will use that your number one gift that God was supposed to provide to people was free will, but it was a gift. It's not a given. It's a process that must be practiced and used daily to be achieved. This is a process in our society now. It's been lost. We don't have these things. We don't have our guideposts anymore. We now are struggling through here is the ability to say no, and we have a tendency at tier 3, people have a tendency to move toward that individualism because they are driven by conviction, not fear of retribution. I'm not going to do it because it's wrong, not because I'm afraid of getting in trouble, because in my opinion, it's wrong. This is a very powerful driving force in humanity, and we will struggle to this. And we will deal with it continually in our processes, in a daily process. As I say, it's fair barter is the thing you're trying to achieve, is that and that alone. Now, I agree now in humanity, there's actually tier 4 and tier 5 according to certain constructs of different religions and everything. You can find that is derived in Hinduism going in through the chakras and things such as that. And tier 4's basic representation would basically be something very similar. It goes, hey, tier 3 is, I recognize you have an I want and I need, and I have my I want and I need. And we're going to try to do fair barter and fair trade. That's the foundation of what a tier 3 would think of and try to operate on. A tier 4 would sit there and go, I know my I want and I need, and I know your I want and I need. But is there something I'm doing that I could actually help you achieve your I want and I need without causing harm or interfering with my own I want and I need? And if I can do that, then I should do that.
Mhm.
You see these written in prescriptions in certain religions, or you could go back into Proverbs and you would see that don't deny your brother what you can give him today, etc., all those different verses. It's throughout many, not just Christianity, but you see it in Islam, you see it in Hinduism and Buddhism and Thai. Anyway, there's many religions. As you study through on that, you'll find that same philosophy holds true over and over again. I want to thank you to say, to understand that this process is, and understand, like all humanity, we ourselves continue to grow from our life experience. It's stagnation or growth, either for humanity or for the individual. And sometimes that's why, personally, I think we have a lot of 40-year-old teenagers running around. But that's in the story.